Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have full review of the OPPO Reno13F. Let's get started. Listen carefully, because OPPO has an extensive lineup of the OPPO Reno13 series. Then there is an OPPO Reno13F which doesn't have the 5G designation, making it a simpler model. In this instance, we are discussing the 4G edition, which is positioned below the OPPO Reno13. While it might appear to be the base model, this particular edition with the letter F is actually placed below it. Additionally, there is the Pro model, which is positioned above the base model in the lineup. Alas. The terminology might seem somewhat complex, yet let's delve into all the details about this device, consistently evaluating it in relation to its cost. Clearly, if you're from a different country and the price is significantly lower, you will likely be able to disregard several critiques, since at least in Mexico the price isn't known for being particularly competitive. The price is 10,999 pesos, which translates to approximately $745. This is for the sole version available, featuring 12 GB of RAM and 256 GB of storage. At this price point, it competes directly with devices like the Honor 200, which I believe has been a strong contender, as well as the Galaxy A56, one of Samsung's most popular models. Fortunately, OPPO has enhanced its distribution network, and now you can find it at Amazon, AT&T, Electra, Coppel, and several other retailers. This broader distribution means you can also discover some unique promotions that make the price even more attractive. However, let's move beyond just discussing price and availability and dive deeper into everything else about it. Let's begin our discussion by addressing the front design. We will notice that the bezels are somewhat reduced, but considering the price, I believe we could start expecting something a bit more advanced. This is especially true for the lower bezel, which is slightly thicker, making it look less modern. Regarding durability, it is shielded with a type of glass known as AGC DTs, which doesn't have the same reputation as Gorilla Glass. Glass or other crystals available on the market, we cannot be certain about the level of resistance they might achieve against falls. Furthermore, the frames do not provide much assistance either, as they are crafted from plastic rather than metal. However, the manufacturer claims that the internal components include advanced features like bionic damping and sophisticated shock absorption technologies to safeguard it from sustaining any internal damage. Nevertheless, we would prefer to see a lot more metal frames. On the right side, we will discover the volume buttons along with the on-off button, while on the top, there will be a microphone and a small grill for the secondary audio output. On the left side, we find absolutely nothing, and we simply observe it. To observe that it possesses a thickness of 7.76 millimeters. It is indeed a stylish device weighing in at 192 grams. I believe in this regard, we can identify one of its most appealing features. At the bottom, we locate a tray where two SIM cards can be placed along with a micro SD card. However, keep in mind that if you purchase it through any phone company, it's probable that the second card slot might be restricted. The SIM will arrive locked, so think carefully about where you plan to purchase it. Next, we discover a microphone, a USB-C port, and lastly, the speaker featuring two perforations. On the rear, there is an attractive design, similar to the base model. The manufacturer claims this is a glass cover, although it boasts an intriguing finish that, to be honest, doesn't quite feel like glass in the hand. It features a satin finish similar to the base model, which reflects an appearance akin to butterfly wings. Here, I have the purple edition, although it is also offered in grey. The back cover is entirely flat without any curved edges, however, being thin, it remains comfortable to hold. The camera module is designed within an acrylic piece that features rounded corners. Aesthetically, I find it quite appealing as it doesn't disappoint. In terms of durability, it even manages to surprise me, offering IP69, IP68, and IP66 ratings. This means it has excellent resistance to water, which is especially noteworthy in its price range. Many devices might only offer IP66 or IP68, but in this case, it truly stands out. I believe that when it comes to design, OPPO usually doesn't let us down, although I still have some reservations about the glass. It's up to IP69. Which means that even within the camera settings, you'll discover an underwater mode. This mode enables you to utilize the side buttons to capture photos while submerged. And even after you exit that underwater mode, the device will produce a loud sound through the speaker to expel any water that might have accumulated there. Then the manufacturer itself, let's say, invites you to use the device underwater to take pictures. And that's something that not all manufacturers that have water resistance do, so we could be sure that it will have very good level of resistance. Resistance? I think that in terms of design, OPPO does not disappoint, except for the glass, which I still have my doubts. Luckily, it includes a glass that's glued at the factory, which can help too. The screen aligns with industry standards, resembling what numerous other devices provide. Specifically, it features a 6.67-inch diagonal, full HD resolution and AMOLED technology. While this screen is quite similar to the typical smartphone display, I believe that many devices already boast an excellent screen, and this one will certainly not be an exception to that trend. It provides a great level of detail. Regarding the AMOLED screen, it will give us vibrant colors, excellent viewing angles, and nearly perfect contrast. In fact, the screen includes two display modes. One mode offers more saturated colors, while the other provides more natural colors, depending on your preference. Additionally, it allows for manual adjustment of the screen's color temperature. In this particular case, it lacks a feature comparable to True Tone or anything similar. The screen's peak brightness reaches up to 1200 nits, ensuring it appears well under sunlight. It's set to support age content. I say set to because, for instance, on YouTube, it may show compatibility with this video mode, but the content doesn't truly appear as impressive as it does on other devices that also support HDR. In fact, the camera also doesn't have Pro XDR technology that OPPO usually incorporates in other devices to take advantage of the HDR properties of the display. For anyone who doesn't quite know what I'm talking about, it's a technology that allows you to cast more brightness on the screen in specific areas to create a much more realistic, lifelike feel. For instance, Instagram does not appear to utilize the HDR capabilities of the screen. Therefore, overall, it is not an outstanding screen, but it also does not let you down. In my opinion, within this price range, it remains within what we might anticipate. The minimum brightness of the screen might still be too high for a few people, especially considering that it does not include the additional dimming mode in the options. The screen has quite low accessibility, which means if you're planning to use it at night with minimal brightness, even though you activate both the dark mode and eye care mode, you might still require a further reduction in brightness, which the screen cannot achieve. Additionally, it features a 120Hz refresh rate, providing extremely smooth motion within this price range, which is considered standard. And I insist the screen is a key element where smartphones increasingly excel, and this will be no exception. This device offers stereo sound as expected, meeting standards. The audio quality is as anticipated, with the main speaker at the bottom delivering the most power, especially in bass. The top part provides complementary sound, which seems acceptable. Consider that in this case it integrates an additional gain mode that is called as 300%, that when you are already at maximum volume you can press the volume button up again and it is going to increase the power significantly, although mostly in the mid and treble frequencies. So the audio quality is a little bit abandoned in favor of the volume when you activate this mode, which I think is the best way to get a better sound, which is perfectly acceptable if they provide the user with the option to decide whether or not to utilize it. It sounds quite loud, yet the quality is as expected. Let's go ahead and listen to a test, but keep in mind that it's not the same as experiencing it live.
An accident way.
Note that in this case, the manufacturer provides an equalizer only for headphones, not for speakers, and this is when using the music profile. Among the default presets, there is an option called Reality Audio, similar to Dolby Atmos, but again, it's exclusive to headphone use and has. Additionally, there's a feature known as Holo Audio, which aims to provide us with a slightly more immersive experience. In general, the sound experience tends to be more concentrated when using headphones. Therefore, in that regard, it somewhat lacks through the software. Nonetheless, one aspect I appreciate is its integration of a feature called Application-Specific Volume. This feature enables you to control the volume when multiple applications are playing simultaneously. On your phone, you can lower an app's volume while keeping another high, like playing games with music, which I like. Note, it lacks a headphone jack like others in this category, so use wireless headphones. For music, you'll have access to the aptX and LDR codecs, along with the basic codecs. This setup provides you with high-resolution audio quality. However, if you have headphones that are compatible, for gaming purposes, you'll need to use USB-C headphones. This will be the sole method to achieve zero latency. We will have two microphones available for you, so let's listen to a test to see how they perform.
Esta es una prueba grabada con los micrófonos del OPPO Reno13F 5G.
Here it provides a feature called Clear Voice, letting us toggle a specific level of noise cancellation on the microphone. This works with other calling apps besides the phone, like WhatsApp. Now, let's see how it performs in a noisy environment. As you noticed, I think the microphones behave well in noisy scenarios like concerts, adjusting the gain well to avoid distortion and also respecting the dynamics of when the volume goes up and down. The experience has been very positive in that aspect. And to close this block, let me tell you that the vibration motor is on the Z-axis. This seems below our expectations, as the experience won't feel premium in hand feedback. Most devices in this category use an X-axis motor for a more premium feel, like high-end ones. However, here the vibration will be it's simple. When you're typing using the keyboard, for instance, you might notice it. Fortunately, within the motors on the Z-axis, it's not as bothersome. For example, the vibration isn't loud or obvious, so it's more of a minor detail. However, if you're very particular, you might still be able to detect it. This device's front camera is 32 megapixels. In a central cutout at the screen's top, it has an f-aperture of 2.4 and fixed focus. Note, if your phone is locked, double press the volume down key to quickly open the camera, though it's slower than I'd like. Additionally, it includes an option to draw an O on the screen to directly open the camera. However, both options are disabled by default. Also, keep in mind that if you're already using the phone in any other mode, there isn't a quick shortcut to access the camera, which reduces its versatility. It's important to note that this front camera will provide us with low agility, as it doesn't seem to respond quickly. Extremely fast, with constant touches, it provides us with 2 different levels of amplitude. Additionally, we will also discover around here the filters that we are able to preview in real time, even though we cannot modify their intensity. Furthermore, we have included the beauty mode, which indeed has numerous parameters. It comes with an automatic adjustment feature, but you are able to manually calibrate each of these parameters, and believe me, you can perform these adjustments in real time. It's a huge number, allowing you to fully customize 100% to enhance or change your face. With all parameters maxed out, it might seem like you've had facial procedures, but you control the intensity. At the top, there's also a button to adjust exposure, helpful when the scene is dark and the camera needs to brighten, light. Here you can adjust it quite well. And regarding capture facilities, note that there is an option to touch anywhere on the screen to take the picture or to show the palm of your hand, which will then start a brief countdown before capturing the image. It also includes the live photo option, indicating that it will record a short video to capture a picture in some way. A way to recall what was happening, much like what occurs with the iPhone. Interestingly, it also records some audio, even though it doesn't provide extra playback options like bounce or similar features. Observing the outdoor results, I believe the front camera performs well, making good use of the sensor's resolution, giving us a decent level of detail, although it is noticeable. I would also like to point out that in some moments, if you are a bit farther away from the camera than the optimal distance, you might start to come out a bit out of focus. So let's say that for wide shots, it's not a very good option, because if you stretch your arm out too much, I insist that you lose more detail than you should. Indoors, note that the result is still going to be positive, although it doesn't have as much detail as outdoors. Additionally, the colors appear somewhat paler compared to usual, so it won't excel as a front camera. In scenes with backlighting, it fails to provide an optimized preview. While the final result offers better balance in terms of light and shadow, it doesn't depict colors with high accuracy. I must emphasize, you need to be fairly close to the camera to avoid losing too much detail. If you extend your arm too far, the picture will end up being much less detailed, and you might even notice a bit more chromatic aberration in your hair. During nighttime, the device fails to utilize the benefits of having a 32 megapixel sensor effectively. This is in contrast to other devices that, by integrating high-resolution sensors, are able to combine groups of pixels to somehow generate more illumination and better image quality. In this particular case, the image is 32 megapixels. However, it doesn't display a lot of detail, although if you're close to a well-lit source, the outcome is still quite positive. Even when you're in a darker area at night, the result isn't bad with backlighting, but I must emphasize it doesn't have the same level of detail. Yet keep in mind that you can utilize a night mode with the front camera, which enhances the image. It is highly recommended to activate it if you are going to take a night photograph, because it increases the level of detail and also the saturation of the colors. Also remember that you can use the screen as a flash simulation, although the screen gives very cold colors. So if you are in an environment of warm colors, the result is going to look a little unbalanced in color. However, when it comes to taking portrait photos at night using the front camera, I find the quality to be quite good. It creates an impressive bokeh effect and maintains a decent level of detail. Although, of course, it isn't as perfectly clear as a daytime photo would be. But given the low light conditions and the cost of the device, I must say that I really like the photograph overall. However, let's take a closer look at our daytime test. Once again, the bokeh effect indeed looks quite nice, providing a very professional appearance. Yet the edge detection, even on the face and hair, is not particularly precise. Additionally, please note that you won't be able to maintain focus on objects that are at the same distance from you, so the final result might appear somewhat unnatural. It's crucial that when taking these pictures, there are no objects nearby. At the back, there are 3 cameras. First, there's the ultra-wide camera with a 16mm lens, 8 megapixels, f2.2 aperture, and fixed focus. Next, we have the main camera with a 27mm lens, 50 megapixels, f1.8 aperture, autofocus, and optical stabilization. Finally, there's a 2 megapixel macro camera with an f2.4 aperture and fixed focus. The camera system doesn't seem very competitive in this price range. You might find other options with telephoto lenses for better portraits and zoom. Here it sticks to basics. The ultra-wide camera isn't very wide. The macro resolution is quite low, so it lacks many arguments for competition. Notice that the device seems to lack agility in these photos, even when live photo is off, which can be somewhat bothersome. It offers a burst mode, but it's capped at 20 photos, which feels limited. Fortunately, in our test trying to capture number 3, we see that it does not have too much delay, although the burst can take more than half a second to start and has very little space between one photo and another, which is positive because it allows you to extract an exact moment. But having a limit of 20 photos, the truth is that there is very little range. By default, it captures photos in 12 megapixels. However, if you want to fully utilize the 50 megapixels of the sensor, you can switch to this mode. You will notice at the top that we also have the exposure compensation feature available. Additionally, you will find the live photo option I mentioned earlier. At the bottom right, you will again have access to the color filters, and also you have access to beauty mode, but here it's limited to just one parameter. When you touch the screen, you can readjust the exposure or focus, and you even have the option to activate the lock, ensuring it stays in place. Additionally, you can switch to the Pro mode where there are more manual controls available, such as the ISO, which can reach up to 6400, and the shutter speed, which can extend up to 30 seconds. Here, we will also encounter once more the exposure compensation, focus, and white balance settings. It's important to notice that it does not support photography in RAW format. However, it allows us to enable a histogram for extra information. Again, it doesn't seem to cater to photography experts. Regarding more intelligent experiences, observe that when you attempt to scan a document, it doesn't. It has automatic detection from the main mode, but you must switch to document scanner mode to crop the image. It takes a few seconds and it's one of the slowest experiences I've seen. Fortunately, it allows adding more images to the document, but the experience is somewhat slow. Seems to be a bit slow. However, take note of how you can apply an effect to all the pages to optimize the color, making it appear like a photocopy. In addition, it allows you to adjust the crop after capturing or rotate the images before exporting it as a PDF or an image. Therefore, it functions as a scanner with quite good options, even if it is a little slow. Lastly, for scanning QR codes, remember you can do it directly from the main camera interface without extra functions. Now, let's check the results. The ultra-wide camera doesn't impress me, especially with the colors. They appear quite pale, and chromatic aberration is noticeable in some spots, making it look like a photograph, with an overly exaggerated grain, especially given that it's a daytime photo. The main camera shows a significant improvement in color handling, and boasts a much higher level of detail. It also appears to lack severe distortions or very noticeable chromatic aberrations. Therefore, it is indeed a good quality camera, far superior to the ultra-wide, yet still fitting within the expected price range. Observe that this device provides us with a 35mm perspective, leveraging the sensory information, even though it doesn't fully maintain 100% optical quality. Additionally, it enables us to access a 54mm perspective, which is typically provided by a telephoto camera. In this instance, however, I must mention that it does not appear to have an optical level of detail. Instead, you can notice the digital zoom right away. Unlike other devices from OPPO that utilize cropping within the sensor, this one doesn't seem to deliver as detailed results. However, let's take another look at a small carousel of photos captured at various focal lengths. First, we have the ultra-wide camera, followed by the main camera. Now we are viewing the 35mm setting. Next, we have the 54mm setting, equivalent to a 2x zoom, I want to emphasize. It's quite apparent that it's digital zoom, and when you zoom in 5 times, the image quality is very poor. The zoom feature is definitely one of the weakest aspects of this device. Even though the main camera has a high-resolution sensor, it doesn't seem to utilize it effectively. The maximum zoom capability is 10 times, and while it does apply some minor optimization to figures and letters, when it comes to more abstract elements, you'll notice that the results are really not impressive at all. And it's quite poor for the price range. Now we're examining indoor shots once more with a very similar setting. The color accuracy is better on the main camera, and the supposed cropping inside the sensor doesn't maintain detail well in backlit conditions. Interestingly enough, the preview is sufficiently well optimized. The ultra-wide camera provides a good balance of light and shadows, though I expected it to have a slightly lower detail level. Specifically in shadow areas, much detail is lost as it tries to reduce noise, creating an unusual spot effect I hadn't seen in any device before. Perhaps they might resolve it with future updates, I'm not certain, but the reality is that the ultra-wide camera is quite basic. With the main camera, we observe a strong performance. Right from the preview, we noticed a nice balance of lights and shadows, and the photography is generally positive. However, it does have some areas prone to slight chromatic aberration, which isn't entirely common in the main camera, although it's a minor detail that you'll only notice if you get very close to examine the elements of the photograph. However, I must emphasize, with other devices in this price range, it is uncommon to see this in the main camera. During nighttime, the ultra-wide camera delivers a very basic performance once more, but thankfully, if you utilize the night mode, it will adjust and balance much better. The ultra-wide camera is designed to capture significantly better photos of brighter areas. It will enhance the definition of objects and textures more effectively, and it will make an effort to manage noise efficiently. When it comes to the night mode, I believe that if it delivers good results, the same can be expected with the main camera. Therefore, this device truly benefits from using the night mode to achieve improved results in such environments. Even when there are lights present in the frame, the outcome will still be positive and satisfactory. As long as you make use of this special mode, even when applying a 2x zoom, the results are impressive. Without using night mode, the results are quite poor, almost a disaster. However, when you activate night mode, it really provides us with a clear picture. If there's no light in the frame, the ultra-wide camera is very weak, but take note of how significantly it improves when night mode is utilized. Therefore, it's highly recommended to use it. The main camera, when there's no light in the frame, might overexpose the darker areas. This means it might not provide very accurate results when using the automatic mode. However, if you switch to the night mode, it appears to improve the image quality a bit more. Although it seems to generate some artifacts in the darker areas, it doesn't look as overexposed. I understand that in these types of conditions, this can happen. I'm more complex, and for the price, it performs well with night mode. For macro shots, this is the closest the main camera gets. It's a small object and you can't get too close. Zooming in, it's clear it's digital zoom, so the picture isn't that advanced. And the macro camera is quite disappointing. It's a very basic camera, so for macro photography, this device is certainly not suitable. However, let's take another look at the picture taken with the ultra-wide camera. Now, let's switch over to wide scenes, and then let's check out the panoramic mode, which also provides us with a broad perspective. Yet in this instance, it's a low-resolution picture, so that at this price point is a really bad picture. It does give us good range, but the level of detail is too low and it's not able to compete with many of its rivals. For scenes with movement, both the ultra-wide camera and the main camera behave well if you are in good light conditions. Even if you are in the shade, both cameras perform well in terms of capture of movements to avoid swept movements. However, it's important to note that they lose a significant amount of dynamic range. Therefore, in these scenarios, they are likely to cause some areas to be completely burned. And anyway, they might end up having certain inaccuracies as seen in this case, but I believe that this is becoming very demanding. In reality, most devices will display swept movements. This one, I believe, will be. The device also allows us to use the camera's mode, which can be used to capture the camera's motion in a very natural way, and it's a great way to get the most out of it. The device also allows us to use the high-resolution mode to get a picture with all the information from the sensor, and it seems to me that it is not as detailed a picture as we could find in other devices that also have high-resolution sensors, but it does allow you to apply a small crop, yet still maintaining a good amount of detail in the image. Finally, it's important to note that for portrait photography with the perspective of 27mm, the blur appears to be overly aggressive, resulting in an outcome that doesn't look as natural, but rather a bit more professional. Fortunately, it provides us access to the 54mm perspective, which indeed looks significantly better with this level of blur simulating. A telephoto lens, on the other hand, lacks the desired level of detail. Notice that the image you see is very poorly detailed, which makes it not ideal for capturing portrait shots. Here are some other examples. Fortunately, it performs well in terms of object detection. In that regard, it provides a positive experience. However, I must emphasize that it does not take full advantage of its capabilities. The amount of detail present in the 54mm in mode causes it to significantly lose its value. Let's discuss video recording now, because in this situation, fortunately, you can record in 4K. However, it's only possible with the main camera. In a moment, we will examine the results, which might have certain limitations. The front camera, unfortunately, cannot record in 4K, and I believe this is a significant drawback. Most devices in this price range already support 4K recording. Notice in the interface there's a button to quickly change settings, which is well explained. There's another button in the lower left to activate the depth of field effect with a portrait-like blur. We'll see the results soon. Here are the filters that can be applied, but note they're not supported with 4K recording, so applying these features will reduce the resolution. The same occurs with beauty mode, which only has one setting. When you start recording, this ring seems to move, but you can't switch between cameras even in full HD. It also has a button to take pictures, a button to pause and resume the video, and a button to turn on the flashlight. What it lacks is a button to switch to the front camera without stopping the video recording first. And in this case, it doesn't have advanced manual controls for video recording, just a traditional button to adjust focus and exposure, though fortunately, if it has a button to lock it and keep it still. Now let's check the results. The ultra-wide camera again shows weaknesses. It can record in 4K. This could be somewhat forgivable, but if you're not recording in 4K, stabilization is a must. In this case, we're not even walking or moving, and you quickly notice a very aggressive. It's quite detrimental for recording with the main camera when you're recording in K resolution, so that's a potential issue. However, it provides a good level of detail, and in fact, it significantly enhances the color compared to the ultra-wide camera. But it also lacks stabilization, which greatly affects the quality of video recording. You really need a lot of stability, or you should use a base or something similar if you're aiming to a better quality in the videos. Fortunately, with the 2x zoom setting seems to maintain a good quality in this sense if it takes advantage of the sensor culminated, curiously unlike what we saw in the photograph. But let's see a specific example of how the zoom behaves. Remember that in this case, does not allow you to switch from the ultra-wide camera to the main camera, so we are watching. The main camera is the only one allowing up to 10 times zoom. Honestly, the detail is decent, but without stabilization, video quality drops. Here's the video quality with the ultra-wide camera. It controls noise and color well, but again lacks stabilization. The video is completely ruined, appearing of very low quality in that regard. Despite having certain points where most devices tend to fail, most devices do incorporate stabilization. Consequently, you end up seeing a video of very poor quality, which is simply unforgivable at this price point. The main camera has the same issue. It seems to me that the color is what manages it. In most cases, cell phones record with a very pale tone in this same scenario. However, this device manages color quite well. I might even say that it tends to oversaturate just a bit. Interestingly, it appears to handle noise better with the ultra-wide camera compared to the main camera, yet the absence of stabilization ruins it all. In scenarios with backlighting, be aware that when using the ultra-wide camera, not only will you notice chromatic aberration, but you'll also observe that the brightest area becomes significantly overexposed, particularly when it detects a face. If the camera stops detecting the face, you'll notice it performs somewhat better in terms of illumination and becomes more controlled. However, once it detects the face again, it will react a bit aggressively to the backlight. Exposure, so it is not recommended for shooting in these types of scenarios. And the main camera does not improve in this aspect. It is exactly the same behavior. In fact, it also generates chromatic aberration. I insist that in this price range, it is not so usual. And we also see these aggressive jumps in the exposure when it detects or stops detecting the face. It will definitely be necessary to shoot with good lighting in front of you and avoid areas of high light behind you. At night, again, the ultra-wide camera looks pretty bad. Note that in these scenarios where there's a light source nearby, it doesn't come out well. If the light source comes into the frame, it will be completely overexposed, and in the darker areas that don't get too much light, it will be overexposed. In low light conditions, capturing an accurate result can lead to numerous complications. The main camera has seen significant improvements, especially with color saturation. However, there's still a considerable amount of noise in the image, even in well-lit areas. If lights are present in the frame, they tend to burn and cause overexposure, though this is typical for this price range. What is certainly not normal is that the device has difficulty focusing and also produces such a high level of noise, accompanied by this blue or purple tint, which can indeed become quite annoying. It is definitely true that the device records very poorly. I had already pointed out that the stabilization is subpar, but now take a look at our specific stabilization test. Even while simply walking, you can observe a very poor result, and let alone if you're running, it will be a complete disaster. No matter how much you try to keep the device steady and prevent it from moving, the result looks really bad. Even with a somewhat gelatinous effect, it is very poor, and the main camera does not improve. In fact, due to having a slightly closer perspective than the ultra-wide camera, the movements can become even more exaggerated, especially if you're running. So I believe it's quite evident that this device is not ideal for shooting video. Fortunately, the focus, if it behaves properly, reacts quickly. In this instance, you can also observe how the white balance might change very suddenly. However, we are discussing the focus, and in that regard, it performs adequately in well-lit scenarios, as we have already noticed in some other situations. It can even lose its focus. Interestingly, it also gives us the ability to record in portrait mode by blurring the background. However, it immediately appears artificial around the edges. If there isn't too much movement, the result might be somewhat decent, but as movement increases in the video, you'll notice more that the blur looks quite artificial. Luckily, it maintains the effect even without specifically detecting the face. However, it doesn't adjust its intensity based on the person's distance. Ideally, it should reduce the blur if the person is far from the camera and naturally can't focus on objects, but we shouldn't be too particular. Typically, devices with strong performance in this mode are very costly, so we might compromise here. This phone also features various slow motion modes, including one in full HD at 120 frames per second, which is reasonable for the price. However, it seems to operate at a lower bit rate, potentially causing a loss of definition in the areas with more movement, but for the price, it performs well. You can go up to 240 frames per second for slower motion, though the video resolution drops to 700, losing detail but still good slowness. Again, for the price, it performs well. However, if you want a fast camera, remember it won't be stabilized. And the most basic speed setting available is 15x, which could be too fast for certain movements, such as when you're walking or doing other similar activities. Therefore, it primarily focuses on capturing landscape scenes when the device is fully utilized. However, it's important to note that it doesn't offer a time-lapse in 4K resolution, which might not be appealing to everyone. Once more, the front camera can record in 4K, which is a drawback, as it's becoming common in this price range. However, recording will still be basic, not just due to the detail level, but also the lack of stabilization. You've likely heard this many times in the video, but it's very evident and causes the video to degrade quite a bit of quality. Additionally, the colors are not very precise, and in scenarios with backlighting, you will observe that the device prioritizes illuminating the face well, completely sacrificing the brightest areas of the background. It also features a fixed focus, and as I mentioned before regarding selfies, if you're too far from the camera, you will be entirely out of focus, which is also disappointing in this regard. In a sense, when considering indoor scenarios, we will observe something still positive. It appears that with slightly more controlled lighting, the outcome can indeed improve. However, once more, if you venture into some backlit areas, you will notice overexposed sections and more. At night, I honestly anticipated the result to be worse, yet it seems that it still manages to control noise well enough without needing to. I appreciated that the video is shown at a fairly low frame rate per second. This means the movements appear fluid enough, yet there's still noticeable graininess, especially when there's more motion. Although the quality is not great for the price, I had anticipated it to be worse. Nonetheless, video recording is definitely where this device shows its weakest performance. Interestingly, it does have the portrait mode for front recording, which is a feature that very few devices in this price range actually include. This makes it one of the few aspects we can appreciate in the video recording capabilities of this device. Additionally, the results are quite good. Of course, it won't be in 4K as we have already noted, but this particular mode is something I personally liked, even though it's not. It's able to detect objects, but in the price range, no device will do it. In fact, I insist that very few devices offer this mode at this price. We will also find a fast camera mode for the front camera with the same behavior that we had already seen. And finally, we will have the dual recording mode, which can be in this picture in picture style, featuring a small rectangle that displays both the front and rear cameras. Notice that this rectangle can be moved slightly to the right, but there's a small limit. In this instance, resizing this rectangle isn't possible. However, it's important to note that autofocus is functional and it also allows for zooming. So overall, the experience is quite satisfactory, even though it's without stabilization and in full HD. Additionally, we have the option to switch to a round mode, which maintains exactly the same behavior. It's important to note that this is a feature not all manufacturers include, making it an attractive aspect of this device. Lastly, you can utilize the split screen mode, dividing the screen in half when recording in this dual mode, once more with the same performance. On the software side, we will discover Android 15 along with Color OS 15. This is excellent news as it comes pre-updated from the factory. Even more impressive is the update policy, which promises 5 years of software updates and 6 years of security patches. This feature is quite remarkable in its price range and allows it to compete very effectively, possibly highlighting its strongest advantages. And now I'll show you some tools and features of this system. It offers a variety of default themes and great lock screen customization, with depth detection to place the clock in front or behind your picture. We can customize the clock's typography, add small widgets with simple info, and adjust the color. We can also choose the blur style for this screen, and the same goes for the home screen, creating a smooth transition between lock and home screens. Therefore, the extent of customization it provides is quite satisfying to me. It highlights that there are numerous predefined themes available, which we can further personalize, certainly with our images. This feature significantly enhances the ease of personalizing your device. Moreover, it includes support for online themes, allowing you to access a much wider range of options with various styles. Obviously, it will also enable us to modify the font included with the device and adjust the colors. By default, it comes with a specific palette, but we have the option to extract the color palette from our wallpaper if we prefer the rest of the system to be customized in that manner. Additionally, it incorporates the always-on display feature, which by default allows us to display this watch with slightly more detailed information on the screen. We have the option to customize the color and of course decide whether we want notifications to appear or not. With a bit more information, there are various covers available that we can use and apply throughout the entire system. Split into various categories, there are analog clocks and digital clocks offering a nice range of options. However, keep in mind that the screen doesn't always stay on, it eventually turns off and you need to tap it to view the information again. It includes the wallpaper carousel tool, changing images each time you unlock your phone. I find it annoying due to mixing many categories, so I wouldn't use it, but if you want, it's available. It also provides the option to illuminate the edges of the screen whenever you receive a notification, even though with a flat screen it doesn't make much sense. Additionally, in the home screen settings, it offers the option to slide down the icons on this initial screen, allowing you to open them more easily. This is particularly useful in instances where the screen size is too large, but by making this gesture we can reach some other icons with a bit more ease. As we slide down, we can access the default shelf, which highlights that it acts like a distinct center where widgets are specifically designed for this device, such as Spotify. Indeed, it offers a good level of customization, and we can also add additional widgets. However, I must emphasize they are system widgets that differ from the ones we can place on the main screen, which in any case offer us a very good variety as well. I remind you that this device introduces a new layout. By default, notifications and controls are shown on the same page. However, in the settings, you have the option to select the new style, which the split style involves having the controls on one side while placing the notifications on the other side. This setup helps in making more efficient use of the available space. With this style, you can toggle between different pages easily. Additionally, you have the option to decide if you want the text labels to be visible or not, depending on whether you prefer a cleaner and less cluttered view. Moreover, there are live alerts available, which utilize an animation very similar to this one that displays the screen surrounding the camera cutout. In this scenario, there are a few delivery apps that are compatible, but they aren't very well known on this side of the world. It also supports certain music players, yet for instance, YouTube Music isn't included among them. You might observe that even though I am playing music, the controls are absent there nonetheless. If I use Spotify, I am curious to see if the controls will appear. Interestingly, it even provides playback controls along with some additional suggestions to ensure an even more engaging and attractive experience. So, yes, it looks very appealing, but it definitely requires optimization by the developers. In that same section, you'll also see when you are sharing the internet, recording the screen, or even when you have set a timer, and more. If you find yourself in the voice recorder, it will additionally display these tools. When you tap on it, it not only shows you buttons to manage your actions, but you can also choose if you prefer it to present those controls or if you'd like it to launch the application directly. Furthermore, the device provides us with the split screen feature when utilizing this sidebar. It's important to note that we have the capability to customize this sidebar for our favorite applications or the ones we use most frequently. In this way, we can slide the application up or down to open two apps simultaneously. And that's it. By the way, these applications will stay linked in the recent applications list. You can also adjust the space allocated to each of them. With this sidebar, we have the ability to open applications in a floating window mode. However, it's important to note that this mode only supports one window at a time, meaning you cannot have multiple applications floating simultaneously. You are limited to a maximum of 3 applications open at once. Fortunately, in the case of floating windows, both Instagram and YouTube are available for use. This, at times, with certain other devices, they might not function in the same floating mode. Furthermore, you have the ability to adjust both the position and the size of these small floating applications, and they can also be minimized within this sidebar. However, this sidebar is not only useful for opening applications in a split screen or floating screen mode, but it also incorporates additional functionalities such as storage, which, by the way, is synchronized with all your OPPO devices and will allow you to drag and drop with your phone. Note that in this case, I have some pictures in this small clipboard. If I wanted to from the gallery, I can drag more items again to this small clipboard. Then if I'm, for example, in Gmail or WhatsApp, I can also drag them back. These images provide an excellent way to interact by simply dragging and dropping the elements. A similar feature is offered by the second option in this sidebar, which is recent files. In this case, the most recent pictures or documents I have received will automatically appear, allowing for interaction in the same manner. You just need to drag and drop, quite obviously. This is compatible with certain applications. Additionally, this sidebar provides us with tools for capturing the screen, creating screen recordings, and even translating the screen. However, for translation, it uses Google Lens, or you can open the translator included in the suite of artificial intelligence tools. As I'm discussing AI, I'll mention more tools later. However, I dislike that the one-handed mode just shifts the top down, yet some elements remain hard to reach. For instance, in applications, there are certain buttons that are quite complex to access with just one hand, and with this gesture, they completely vanish. The device additionally provides us with various gestures, allowing us to draw letters when the screen is off, giving us a quick shortcut to some applications. Moreover, we also have the capability to capture screenshots by sliding across the screen. Using 3 fingers, which is quite convenient, we also have the capability to take extended screenshots even when our screen ends. This feature is compatible with nearly all applications that display these kinds of lists. Additionally, we have support for air gestures, allowing us to answer calls without touching the screen. This could be particularly useful if you're in the middle of eating and your hands are occupied. If you prefer to avoid getting muddy and wish to keep your screen clean, simply make that gesture and you're all set. However, keep in mind that you need to activate it, which might use more energy than you'd like, but at least the option is there for you. Additionally, we offer the air scrolling feature. These options are conveniently located within the smart sidebar and are fully compatible with these applications. I mentioned that this will help when on TikTok while washing dishes or eating, but it's not active by default. You need to go to the sidebar to enable it. This saves energy by not being always on, and as you see, it works well. I believe this is undoubtedly a very strong point that can prove to be quite useful. Additionally, it features the support sphere, which is a small circle that allows us to perform some quick gestures or display a menu with more options depending on our preference. Moreover, we will come across the Zen space, which is designed to help you completely disconnect from this digital world. Then you, first, decide how long you'd like to be offline and select the apps you wish to have accessible during this time. Additionally, you have the option to customize your wallpaper and other settings. However, proceed with caution, as once you enter the Zen space, you must wait a designated time before you can exit. Furthermore, there is the simple mode available, which enables you to enlarge the icons for easier use. This feature is particularly beneficial for individuals seeking a more comfortable experience. Tool. And within the gallery, there are several options available so that, for instance, we can easily create a collage using various different options. Additionally, you can press and hold on certain images to extract them, and then once again, you can move them to the temporary storage to use them at a later time. To extract text, you have the option to use Google Lens, which integrates seamlessly into the gallery, allowing you to select from your photos. It also integrates its own document application, which also allows you to create text documents, spreadsheets, and presentations. So you don't even need any subscriptions or to download other applications, since that comes perfectly well integrated. It also comes with a compass, something that not all cell phones come with pre-installed, and it comes with its own. Music part, allowing you to play music files across multiple cell phones simultaneously. Of course, it's essential that all of these devices have this feature enabled. Concerning the functions of artificial intelligence, there is a separate video available where I go into detail explaining each one of them. For the moment, let me simply list them for you. It includes AI Studio, which allows you to generate your photos using various templates, so to speak. Additionally, in the voice recorder, you will find options for summaries and transcriptions accessible through these buttons. In the Documents application, we will also find options for summaries and translation, useful when you are going to study and want to just take a quick look at a PDF or something like that. It has a limit of 30,000 characters. And for example, if you are going to write a post or something like that, here we will also find the artificial intelligence editor, which will also take in context the screen in case you might have attached an image or something similar. You can also generate AI summaries of web pages you're reading or have your phone read them aloud. In the gallery, there's an AI editor with options to enhance clarity, remove objects, refocus, and eliminate reflections. It's particularly useful if you take pictures through glass, I must emphasize. In the description, I provided the link where I demonstrate examples of this OPPO artificial intelligence. All functions need an internet connection and also involve collaboration with Google, allowing you to hold down on the slider and zoom in on anything on the screen to uncover more details. In fact, Circle to Search doesn't just let you quickly lock onto and search for something, it also enables you to translate your screen instantly or even select text that is typically difficult to select easily. So it's a really handy tool. Additionally, it includes Gemini, which is the virtual assistant. However, this assistant is present on every other Android device, so it's not something unique to this phone. Within the security features, you'll discover a fingerprint reader embedded in the screen. It can support up to 5 fingerprint records and functions as an optical reader, which is quite adequate for its price range. In the settings menu, you have the option to alter the fingerprint recognition animation to something more to your liking. Additionally, it offers a quick launch feature, enabling you to select certain applications for rapid access or shortcuts that become directly available when we unlock the device. It's important to note that this feature not only provides access to the applications themselves, but also to specific functions within those applications. For instance, if you wanted to play something directly from Spotify, you can set it up as an additional shortcut. This way, it will open Spotify with ease. Just keep your finger on the shortcut and it will open smoothly. The screen will show up, and when you lift your finger, the action will be executed right away. It also comes with facial recognition tools. However, I have to mention that the setup seems odd because it appears as pure Android within ColorOS. This section seems like ColorOS, but once you enter, it resembles pure Android. As you continue, it still looks like pure Android until you reach a certain point. Specifically where it restores the color OS settings, I believe this is something I wasn't very fond of. It appears to be a rather poorly developed operating system in this aspect. However, it does provide two-dimensional facial recognition, which isn't highly advanced. Therefore, if security is your main concern, I would advise against enabling that option. However, it also presents another intriguing option, which is the smart hiding of notifications. When it detects that someone else is looking at your phone, it has the ability to hide the content of those notifications and will only display it when it recognizes that it is you. Additionally, it comes with a Security Center application where we can find even more options, such as the payment protection feature that allows you to create a stronger system to block USB commands during payments in sensitive apps. It includes app lock for fingerprint access to selected apps. Also, you can hide apps from the home screen, accessible via an icon or special code within the phone application. Additionally, there is a private safe where you can securely store all your contents, once more protected by fingerprint. It also offers the option to clone applications, so if you wish to use 2 instances of the same app on one phone, you can select almost any app you desire. Furthermore, it includes a child mode, allowing you to choose which applications will be authorized for use. Additionally, it includes a repair mode that enables you to lock your cell phone's content during those times when you require someone to assist you. Moreover, it features a malware scanner developed in partnership with Avast, which helps you prevent any kind of malicious attack on your device. Note that it also offers the option to remove location and other metadata properties. Additionally, it features a repair mode, letting you lock your phone's contents when you need someone to work on it. It also includes a malware scan in partnership with Avast to help prevent any attacks. Besides these tools, it includes Google's tools accessible on every Android device. In the description, there's a link for you to learn about each one and fully utilize your phone. However, all of this is also accessible on other Android devices as well. The battery in this device has a capacity of 5,800 and 800 mAh, which sounds like something quite spectacular, far superior to what most smartphones generally offer these days. However, during our test, the experience was negative. With this battery, one would anticipate a higher performance compared to what the average smartphone offers, but in this instance, it was actually inferior. While attempting to download as quickly as possible, it nearly reached 4H, but unfortunately, it fell short and did not exceed 4H. This was disappointing in that aspect. In the test where we allowed the battery drainer to run in the background while watching videos in the foreground, the duration was even shorter. This suggests that it lacks effective management of background processes, is available not to completely shut them down, but to give them lower priority. In this situation, you as the user will need to close any apps you aren't actively using to stop the battery from draining more rapidly. During our test, while playing YouTube videos with the screen set at 50% brightness, it lasted for 17 hours and 40 minutes, which was a bit less than what we had hoped for. We had expected this battery to last at least more than 20 hours, but unfortunately it fell short. The battery does seem quite remarkable, however, in my tests it didn't deliver the performance I was hoping for. If you switch to the saver mode, you might be able to extend the battery life a bit further, as it will restrict the processor and other functions more significantly, which can be useful in emergencies. The battery. It features an ultra-safe mode, which means that through software, it offers some good additional features. However, the truth is that the battery performance has been somewhat disappointing. In this particular case, it supports a 45-watt charge. At least this is a more honest charging capacity, since other OPPO devices claim to support an 80-watt charge, yet they perform similarly. So, during my test, in about 15 minutes, it reached 24%. Then in 30 minutes, it went up to 44%, and it completed the full charge in 74 minutes. As you can observe in the graph, it only hits a notably high peak at the initial stage, and after that it remains consistently close to 20 watts. Therefore, overall, both the load and the battery have not been particularly impressive on this device. Fortunately, the charger comes included in the box, and that's something you could benefit from, for example, by comparing it to Samsung, but already the performance didn't get to be as competitive. In this case, we will not find wireless charging or advanced things that, for example, in Motorola, if we could find even in cheaper devices. Unfortunately, smart charging and charging lock help prevent fast battery degradation when you charge your phone overnight or need it plugged in for long periods, offering protection. And in terms of connectivity, this device will have to decide whether it will support 5 grams networks. However, it still does not support Wi-Fi 6. From my perspective, it would be preferable for it to support Wi-Fi 6, even if it doesn't support 5 grams. This is mainly because typically when downloading large files, you use Wi-Fi. In this scenario, the download speed via Wi-Fi isn't as high. Luckily, there's a data lock mode to choose which apps use mobile data or Wi-Fi, avoiding surprises. It includes Bluetooth 5.1, not very modern, and NFC for mobile payments, which is increasingly common now. Price range. It is quite common that we do not find FM radio included, and that will indeed be the case here. However, if you have OTG, you can connect an accessory through the USB port C. OPPO has also integrated several technologies to enhance the connectivity of this device. For instance, they have implemented Beacon Link, which is a technology that enables you to make calls via Bluetooth. This feature is particularly useful when you are traveling to a different location. In areas without mobile signal, calls must be between devices of the same brand, like Realme and OnePlus. The call uses Bluetooth, so the range isn't far, but it avoids shouting. If you have many friends who use iPhones, it also includes technologies designed to disrupt the iPhone ecosystem, allowing for better connectivity with these devices. First, you must install the app or establish a connection on the iPhone, ensuring that all necessary permissions and more are enabled. Once all of that configuration is complete, you should be able to interact by sending photos from an OPPO to an iPhone and vice versa. Even with the technology of simply bringing the cell phones close together and then just pressing accept, it establishes the connection and that's it. The properties of the live photo are respected in both directions, which I think is an important addition. Not all phones have this feature integrated, as this is an application officially created by OPPO. In addition, we will discover wireless screen projection features, which include the option to hide notifications or project with the screen turned off to prevent unnecessary battery usage. You also have the capability to project a single application while using other apps on your phone, offering us excellent versatility in this regard. However, it's important to note that it cannot project your entire screen. Fortunately, Android Auto is respected in both wired and wireless connections. And lastly, regarding the sensors, it's fortunate that there's a physical proximity sensor, which is accompanied by a geomagnetic field sensor, an orientation sensor, a gyroscope, a light sensor, and all other necessary sensors. In that sense, it doesn't disappoint, though it lacks infrared found in other phones for use as a universal remote. I believe that OPPO's ecosystem is expanding, but it still can't really be seen as a strong suit. OPPO provides a selection of headphones, a few tablets and some watches, but overall it remains quite limited in terms of variety. There aren't many models available to choose from, and while in theory it does support functionalities like using the cell phone from the tablet and similar features, this particular model doesn't offer such advanced integration. With computers, you know that OPPO does not have its own laptops. But there are other models that do integrate a much better interaction with both Windows and Mac, although in both cases you need to install and configure various tools, but in this case there is not even that possibility. At the level of services, OPPO will also rely heavily on Google with respect to cloud storage, Google Drive, your photos stored in Google Photos, and your control over home devices through Google Home, among other services. OPPO provides its own app store known as App Market, which serves mainly as a backup plan in case any issues arise with Google services. Despite this, OPPO maintains a strong partnership and collaboration with Google. Nevertheless, it is often seen as being quite reliant on this brand too. I truly hope that OPPO will soon manage to advance its technologies a bit further. In China, they have HeyTop, which is their very own cloud and service portfolio. However, outside of China, they rely almost entirely at 100% on Google. Let's conduct a test to see how quickly the OPPO Reno13F 4G launches applications using our usual method. This device is equipped with the Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor, 12GB of RAM, and 256GB of storage, with the option to insert a microSD card. In this scenario, it took approximately 2.75 seconds on average to open each of these applications. So the truth is, when we consider that this processor is somewhat old and not very powerful, OPPO has done an excellent job with optimization. Trust me, we've tested this processor in other cell phones where its performance is significantly worse. In this situation, it seems that having a good amount of RAM memory is advantageous. Typically, this processor might be paired with 6 or even 8GB of RAM. However, in this particular case, it comes equipped with 12, and I must emphasize that this provides it with significantly greater agility. In this instance, it is not entirely free from the occasional reboot of certain applications, but overall, I believe it delivers a performance level that will satisfy a considerable number of users. Clearly, it is not a device that will particularly stand out for its power, especially when you consider applications that demand too much. Processing can start to feel quite slow when dealing with very complex effects. Of course, there are other effects that aren't as demanding, but on the whole, the device lacks significant power. However, it's important to mention that when scrolling through Facebook, for instance, the device doesn't completely freeze or anything drastic like that. It merely takes a bit of time to load all the remaining content. The overall experience has been quite positive. Even with numerous applications running simultaneously, I find that OPPO maintains a high level of optimization. While the processor doesn't become overly prominent, OPPO effectively utilizes it to its fullest potential, reaching 100%. The 12GB of physical RAM is further enhanced by virtual RAM. However, with such an abundance of physical RAM, I find the virtual RAM somewhat unnecessary, as I don't really see the need for it. I have used this option, but it comes on by default, and here you can see statistics of more or less how much RAM you consume applications and more storage. I think it is a positive point. 256GB is a good capacity, and consider that if you can put a microSD card, which I think becomes one of its main attractions, because in the price range, almost no device has that option. Additionally, consider that within the Security Center, you have access to a variety of tools designed to help you clean up your storage. For instance, it provides options to review photos taken in burst mode and screenshots that you might not need anymore. Furthermore, it offers features to clean up videos, allowing you to identify which ones are taking up the most space. There are also other useful tools included, such as a WhatsApp debugger, among others, and Instagram. So, I believe it's going to be quite challenging to fill up your device. When it does eventually fill up, you'll be able to clean it up more easily. Now, let's proceed with our storage speed test to observe how it performs. Please note that in this instance, it does reach some peaks that are a bit higher than what we had anticipated. Does it perform well? I think that for its price range, it performs quite well. The typing speed also meets expectations. But what do you think if we try a real-life test? Because these numbers, I believe, don't tell us much unless you're really particular about them. Here is a short video. Let's try exporting in K, although now it seems to be asking us to have the Pro account, but it is the same test we have conducted on all the other devices, so we will attempt to see if it allows us. It seems like it did allow us, although it will undoubtedly add a watermark, and that watermark signifies a bit more work than what we have typically tested on other cell phones. However, next, we will test on another editor to be completely 100% certain. Currently, it appears to be rather slow. There you go, it took 1 minute and 48 seconds, which is a really bad time. This somehow confirms what we had already suspected, which is that this processor is quite weak. I must emphasize that when it comes to opening applications, it shows a very good system optimization. However, in this scenario, it does not rely heavily on the system's optimization, but more on the raw power of the processor, and it falls short here. We'll do the same test with the same project from another app, again in 4K, which we usually test in this price range, and it took even longer, confirming it's a poor choice for 4K video editing. In full HD, it might be faster, but normally we do the same tests on cell phones in its price range, and they have behaved much better than this one. For games, it includes its own dedicated games application. Here, the content you have installed will be displayed, but there's also a section for quick games. These quick games can be played without needing to download anything, which helps save storage space. Naturally, these are simpler games, yet this option is available. Additionally, within the settings, you have the choice to select whether you want the extra tools or not. You can additionally hide the icons from the main screen, leaving them visible solely within this game application. Furthermore, you have the option to choose whether you prefer calls to be answered via speaker, which helps in avoiding interruptions. You can also select the notification style to prevent being interrupted and manage the automatic brightness lock for convenience. You can choose to cache certain games for faster loading next time, and the device will smartly adjust the screen resolution to manage high temperatures more effectively. This option is enabled by default, which is the reason we have left it on. In this section, it details all the options that are activated or deactivated when you switch into championship mode. Please note that upon entering a game, a small bar will appear displaying the optimizations being applied. After that, we have the ability to directly access certain applications in a floating format without interruption. Exit the game, we'll find the performance profile to prioritize saving battery or running at max power. There are also Spotify and brightness controls. With one touch, enable championship mode to restrict interruptions and apply optimizations on your device. Additionally, we will find that manually blocking calls is possible, or you can take screenshots and screen recordings. Moreover, you can optimize the network to minimize latency. We will also discover the touch optimization feature, which enhances the responsiveness of your screen touches. You can lock the rotation, and furthermore, you have the option to save this game in cache for games that require it. By using your microphone, you have the ability to alter the style of your voice. Additionally, in this section, you can enable or disable the automatic resolution feature I mentioned earlier. Furthermore, you can keep the system monitored constantly with details like CPU usage, GPU usage, and the current frames per second. This is a very positive aspect. And there is also an option for the screen to dim when the game is running. And it is currently downloading content to prevent further draining of the battery. Finally, you have access to adjust the volume, and that's the entire suite of tools it provides, which I believe is beneficial. But let's examine the results in Call of Duty. By default, it offers high graphic quality at a very high frame rate. Note that we can increase to the maximum rate while still retaining. The graphics quality is high, which is definitely a positive. However, it's important to note that other devices also support higher quality graphics. If you prefer more detailed graphics, you can find other devices in this price range that offer greater graphic detail. Fortunately, the experience with this configuration has been good, so if you're not too demanding, you'll be satisfied. At maximum graphics compatibility, either way, the experience will be positive. 60 frames per second with very good stability and good temperature. Control, although this test is still not the most complex that we will apply, but it behaves well in these scenarios. The screen recording can present some stumbles, so for recording gameplays I would not say it is an expert. I believe that gamers might prefer different options, but if you're just an amateur gamer, you'll still enjoy a good experience. Next, we played Legends, adjusting the auto setting to medium detail at 60 frames per second. We have to admit that with this configuration, you will continue to experience very good performance. However, if you decide to select a higher graphics setting, you might encounter a few more challenges. That's why it is also important to go adjusting more or less the graphic quality, recognizing that this device is not going to stand out, especially for raw power or anything like that. But with this configuration, it is also going to perform in a good way. Again, in screen recording, you might get to see some stumbles, but if you don't record the screen, you're going to have a super smooth experience. Then we played SpongeBob SquarePants. Interestingly, by default, it is set to high resolution and quality at 60 frames per second. To test it based on the price, we reduced the resolution to a medium level. Once again, the result was positive. In the graph, it appears a bit more unstable with several fluctuations. However, since the minimum peak is 47, it maintains a smooth performance without recording the screen. While recording a screen, you might notice that there are more stumbles. Interestingly, these stumbles are not as noticeable while you're actively playing. However, the resulting screen recording will indeed have many more hitches, which would not provide a good experience if your main priority is to record gameplays. Nonetheless, I must emphasize that the temperature is excellently controlled throughout this process. OPPO features AI Hyperboost, advanced algorithms aiding frame rate stabilization and temperature control. This is evident in this device. The processor is basic. We've tested it on other devices with lower performance. It appears that OPPO has achieved a good level of optimization for this device, fully leveraging the processor's capabilities. I must emphasize that while the processor isn't the most remarkable, the gaming experience has been quite positive, provided you don't record the screen. Finally, we played Genshin Impact, which by default offers low graphics quality. However, for testing, we increased it to a medium level with 60 frames per second in order to assess its capabilities, and in this case you can observe that it did not reach 60 frames per second. Instead, it self-limited to 30, even though we had configured it for 60. This might be attributed to the same algorithm I mentioned earlier, which could prioritize a more stable execution with fewer fluctuations. Possibly if it attempted to reach 60 frames per second, we might have seen many more fluctuations. Here seem intelligently adjusted for greater stability but less fluidity. The device maintains good temperature control at 39.3 degrees Celsius. Few devices run Genshin Impact below 40 degrees Celsius in our tests, so the temperature control is perfect. However, this comes at the cost of sacrificing some fluidity in games. Ultimately, it will depend on your personal preference as a user, what you prioritize more. It should be noted though that the device takes excellent advantage of its steam chamber, which measures 4,364 millimeters square, to effectively cool down the device. In fact, within this price range, it's not very common to find devices equipped with steam chambers, so this is definitely a positive aspect. But keep in mind that this device is not always primarily intended for gamers. In conclusion, this device has good design aesthetics and resistance, especially to water with IP69, though the glass's resistance is uncertain. The screen and sound are standard, with an extra gain mode up to the 300%, even though the sound quality isn't spectacular. It still manages to be quite loud. As for the front camera, I believe it can hold its own in competition, but the rear cameras tend to fall a bit short, particularly because they don't fully utilize the high-resolution sensor when zooming in. The macro camera is rather basic, yet on the software side, there's a commendable optimization providing a correct preview. Even when you're in backlit conditions, in that regard, the experience manages to recover somewhat. However, when it comes to video recording, it remains quite basic. You won't be able to record in 4K with the front camera, and the stabilization offered is quite minimal. So, if you're someone who truly enjoys recording videos, this option might not be the most appealing. As for the battery, even though it is 5,800 mAh, during my test it actually performed as if it were a significantly better battery. The battery is small, under 5,000 mAh. Yet OPPO focuses on AI features in this phone, highlighting its main strengths like writing and image editing options. While these require an internet connection, other phones in this price range don't offer as many tools. At the security level, it offers several software tools that complement the fingerprint reader that is inside the screen. And in performance, obviously for the most demanding it will be very short, but for a good number of users who are not so demanding in terms of the speed of their cell phone, they will perceive that the device runs well. I find it curious that OPPO is one of the manufacturers that best leverages and optimizes and squeezes the most processors. In other models, we see that are processors that come to be very short. In OPPO, seems that somehow strive to try to make the processor perform better, especially at the level of games. Is not that it's a specialist in games, but this processor squeezed the most another. The most remarkable aspect is that it enables you to interact with the screen without physically touching it, using gestures that are effortlessly recognized and function effectively. Like any mid-range device, it has its pros and cons, and as a user, it's up to you to decide what suits your needs best. At this point, we've come to the conclusion of this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to let us know, and we'll catch up with you in the next one.